What's up, writers? In this quick tips video, I'm doing the first in a three-part series focused on easy ways to improve your dialogue in fiction. Dialogue is often what brings fiction to life, not to mention that some genres like plays, screenplays, and comic book scripts are almost entirely dialogue-driven. So improving your dialogue technique is essential to improving almost all forms of narrative writing. In this quick tips video, I'm just going to focus on 5 basic tips. Even though these tips might seem obvious though, they're things that almost all writers, myself included, can get better at. Here are the tips. Now, this last tip, trust the reader, is a big one. Stephen King said in his book on writing, "I'm convinced that fear is at the root of most bad writing." It's good advice, and it's particularly true when we're talking about dialogue. A lot of times, beginning writers use fancy, distracting dialogue tags like "he whined" or "she asserted" because they're afraid that the reader won't get how a character said something from the dialogue itself, so they want to tell us how it's said. But when dialogue is well written, syntax, diction, and context show how things are said. In other words, trust the reader to get it from the dialogue. Also, trust the reader to get the subtext from what's left unsaid or from how characters avoid saying things. More on this in the next video. The biggest thing that messes up dialogue, though, is when writers are afraid to let go of control of a scene. So they make the characters say what they want them to say. But dialogue is where you need to let your characters say what they want to say, the way that they'd say it. The best lines are often the unexpected lines. When a writer is afraid to loosen the reins and let characters speak, the result is often clunky, forced, inauthentic lines. So put your fears aside when you write dialogue. Trust the reader, trust your characters, let go of control, and see where the dialogue leads. Let's put these tips into practice with some quick examples. Here's a short scene. Horace squinted at the woman in the red hat standing in line before him. "Sally Yurst? Is that you?" queried Horace, a note of doubt distorting his voice. She turned, appearing startled as she scanned the people standing in line at the grocery store. Then she noticed Horace, and her eyes fell from his clean-shaven face to his expensive Italian shoes before meeting his gaze. "Well, if it isn't the king of pranks himself," she crooned flirtatiously. "You haven't changed a wink." "If that's true," chuckled Horace, "then I wasted a lot of time and money studying for 8 years to become an anesthesiologist while working nights at a laundromat, even though I hated it." "So I've heard." "You did, Sally?" questioned Horace, raising his eyebrows quizzically. "What else have you heard about me?" Okay, so there's a lot that could be improved in this dialogue. If you want a quick writing activity, pause this video and see if you can come up with a better version of this dialogue using the above tips. I'll meet you back here in a moment. And the moment has passed. So using the above tips, what I focused on was cutting the fancy tags that over-explain things and disrupt the rhythm of the dialogue. Also, tags like chuckled Horace or sighed or laughed are things that annoy many editors because you can't really chuckle, laugh, or sigh a line. You can laugh and then say something, but it's often better to let the reader imagine the laughing or the smiling or obvious gestures like that. In fact, a good rule of thumb is to only include gestures when they're not obvious. The other thing you might have noticed in the above dialogue is that some of these lines don't sound like something a person would actually say, or even could say, in one breath. Instead, they sound like the characters are being forced to convey information that the writer wants the reader to get. So we'll cut those lines too. And if we do all that, we might get something like this. Horace squinted at the woman in the red hat standing in line ahead of him. "Sally Yurst?" The woman looked him up and down. "Well, if it isn't Horace Bredman, the king of pranks himself. You haven't changed a wink." "If that's true, then I wasted a lot of money on medical school. I'm a doctor now." "So I've heard." "You did? What else have you heard about me?" You might notice that I cut almost half the words there. I did this to show the power of cutting the clutter and trusting the reader to get things from the dialogue itself. In dialogue, less is often more, but making the right cuts takes work. As Mark Twain put it, "I apologize for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." Of course, there are other ways to improve dialogue. The really interesting stuff is what we're going to explore in the next 2 videos. That's it for this one. Please click the like button and check out the next video in the series.